Hello and welcome to This Week in Cleantech, a 15-minute roundup of the biggest stories in climate and clean energy this week. Today is Friday, August 21st, 2026. We have returning guest Molly Taft joining us shortly. I'm Jeremiah Karpowicz, Content Director at Clarion Events. I am not in my office. I'm at an industry event. I'm also not Paul Gerke. Things are all over the place, but thankfully we have some stability because I'm joined by Cleantech commentator Mike Casey of Tigercomm. Mike, how in the heck are you?
Buddy, if I'm your source of stability, we are in a lot of trouble. Let me just say that. But I do, look, I'm a little backstage drama here. Gerke wanted me to relay a request since you're higher ranking than him. He saw the Kristi Noem statue that she has done of herself out in South Dakota. And he would, there's no easy way to put it, he would like a statue of himself in Clarion Square. And I'm just forwarding the request. Look, he let you in a Star trailer. He'd like a statue of himself. He didn't want to make the ask himself, so he put me up to asking, and I'm just doing the ask. Okay, so you run up to Paul Daniel. You guys talk about it. I don't need a statue. I'm good, but he would like a statue of himself.
Can we get maybe a little miniaturette of you, maybe like a paperweight, like because I'm gonna get on the Clarion phone. I'm gonna get on the Clarion phone. I'm gonna send it up the ladder. But I mean, being able to make both of those requests, I don't know, 2 for 1. I think that's a better pitch.
I'm just a commentator. Gerke's the anchor of the show. But anyway, okay. Look, I did my job. Gerke wanted me to do it. It's done. Mission accomplished.
I'll let you know what we hear back from the powers that be. So we always appreciate hearing from viewers and listeners like you. We want to make those opinions part of the show. So if you have a story you want to see covered, email us at twic@tigercomm.us. So Mike, let's get into it. What's the first story that we're covering?
First story, Anissa Gardizzi from the Wall Street Journal. OpenAI locks in Lease for huge data center in Ohio with backing from Nvidia. I'm adding the emphasis on huge, Jeremiah.
Huge for many reasons, and data center, everything. That's going to be something we're talking about a lot today, but ongoing as well. But specific to this news, OpenAI signed a 20-year, 10 gigawatt data center lease in Southern Ohio with SoftBank's SB Energy, and that's the largest data center project announced to date. Nvidia isn't backing the value of this completed facility to the tune of up to $105 billion. So SB Energy can borrow against the project without lenders worrying too much about what happens if OpenAI ever walks away. Giving yourself options, depending on what some of these hyperscalers would do, is smart. That's a much smaller ask than the roughly $250 billion all-up guarantee Nvidia was reportedly considering earlier this summer, before investor pushback over the exposure sent its stock down 5% in late July. In this exchange, Nvidia becomes the exclusive chip supplier for that first half of the campus and is taking a $1.5 billion equity stake in SB Energy. So Mike, tell us what you think about this.
The site, it sits partly on a former DOE uranium enrichment property and is expected to generate enough power for 7 million homes. That's a lot of power. It's backed by a 9.2 gigawatt gas plant that will be owned by the U.S. government and financed through the U.S.-Japan trade deal. Jeremiah, it's really good that the hyperscalers are getting underwritten by taxpayers because, as a scrappy startup industry that's cash strapped, they kind of need it. But hey, Nvidia, it's not just de-risking someone else's bet, it's also lining up hundreds of billions in chip sales into the same campus and has talked about financing OpenAI's purchase of that hardware too. SB Energy is also eyeing an IPO as soon as next month to raise $5 to $7 billion. And this lease gives them a very good number to put in front of investors. Yeah, I would say so. That's the understatement of the week. Jeremiah, story number 2.
So our second story is by Christopher Cox over at the New York Times, and that's titled "The Blackout That Could Devastate America."
Yeah, this is definitely a must-read story if you work in the power industry. So in 2013, snipers shot up a PG&E substation near San Jose, disabling 17 transformers and knocking out enough capacity to threaten a Bay Area blackout. And these guys were clearly skilled. They knew what parts of the substation to shoot at. They've never been caught. And a friend of mine, John Wellinghoff, the former FERC chairman, was in the middle of all this. So he had subsequent modeling by FERC later found out that taking out just 9 critical substations nationwide could black out the entire country for 18 months. Large power transformers, the truck-sized units that step down in high-voltage electricity for local use, are mostly bespoke and hand-built and can take up to 5 years and cost as much as $14 million each. The U.S. only manufactures 20% of what it buys. A significant portion of the country's large power transformers were already averaging 38 to 40 years old over a decade ago, meaning now many of them are well past that. The smallest street-side distribution transformers have a 50-year expected lifespan, and 75% of those already passed due to be replaced. So replacing this aging fleet and powering new data centers could double the demand for large power transformers by 2027. That would be next year. This has pushed hyperscalers to pay premiums to jump the manufacturing queue of heavy utilities and factories. If a coordinated attack knocked out enough substations, experts say the recovery could take years, not weeks, since replacement transformers have to be custom built and are too heavy to move without specialized rail cars that barely exist in North America anymore. Jeremiah, what do you think?
No, I'm really glad that we included this one, Mike, because obviously the headlines are being dominated by data centers. We're going to be talking with Molly about all of that, but like this security issue, it's one of those that's always been around. It's underneath the surface, and it's just so important in a way that stories like this really highlight and bring to surface. And even that came up even at the event that I'm at. I mean, more folks are asking about security in a way that they didn't even 5 years ago, and it's just really important because dozens of other facilities have really been targeted in this way, and that's since the 2013 Metcalf shooting with similar tactics. In 2022 attack in North Carolina that left 45,000 people without power for up to 5 days, but neither of those incidents led to an arrest. Data centers are accelerating one possible fix, though. Companies like Ampersand and Heron Power are racing to commercialize solid-state transformers, which are modular and easy to replace, with components that are easier to source, swapping hand-wound copper and oil for modular power electronics. Hyperscalers are also becoming the first customers because Nvidia has already redesigned its data center blueprints around them. So I think you can see here, Mike, all the things happening in the space, they have these connections, and how data centers could be have a solution within that's enabling this bigger problem. I think there's a lot to dig into. So what's our third story?
Summer Maxwell, Bloomberg. Big batteries to bolster the grid are stuck waiting to plug in. Jeremiah.
Gosh, this is another one that battery storage is another topic that's been out there forever, but how it's changing and coming on in a bigger way, I think needs to be top of mind, and is something that I'm looking forward to digging into for content for our site and our events, because battery demand is surging. I mean, data centers and electrification push the electricity use up, but connecting those batteries to the grid it's actually getting slower somehow. Nationwide, roughly 750 gigawatts of storage projects are sitting in interconnection use, waiting to get hooked up. And the median wait time has jumped from 1.5 years in 2015 to 5 years in 2025. So where's that going to leave us in 2030 if that keeps going at that pace? The holdup is mostly equipment, meaning transformers, circuit breakers, and other grid gear that are in such short supply that utilities can't build the upgrades fast enough. PG&E says some circuit breakers now take nearly 4 years to procure. I mean, it's something that comes up in how many different conversations, Mike. It's just we want this equipment, we want it, and the backlog just keeps getting longer and longer, and that's across the board. In New York, Con Edison started requiring battery developers to help pay for grid upgrades if their project would strain local infrastructure. Its goal was to stop the grid from being overwhelmed by too many projects in the wrong places, but it's raised the average project cost by $21 million and has already led to at least 25 cancellations. So, Mike, a lot here. What do you think?
Yeah, like the blackout risk outlined in the last story, this battery slowdown is largely a consequence of grid equipment shortages, including transformers. Even when they're cheap and ready to build, batteries are stuck between the same equipment bottleneck, slowing everything else on the grid. Regulators are trying to unclog the queue by prioritizing further along projects over a first-come, first-served basis, and by penalizing developers who file speculative applications just to hold a spot in line. The bigger picture is that batteries are one of the more shovel-ready tools we have to manage rising demand, but shovel-ready doesn't matter much if there's a 5-year line just to plug in. Jeremiah, or fourth story?
Our fourth story is one I have a lot to say about because that's by the aforementioned Paul Gerke, and that's titled "The DOE Says We Need More Transmission, but Decides Building Less is Fine." Mike, you're up first.
Oh boy. Where do you start? The Department of Energy is killing off the review process for the last three proposed National Interest Electric Transmission Corridors, or NIETs. These are DOE-designated regions that are eligible for loans and permitting tools intended to speed up transmission development in high-congestion parts of the grid. All 7 of the others had already been scrapped back in 2024. These 3 corridors would have spanned more than 3,500 miles, connecting Canada to the PJM grid, linking the Southwest Power Pool with WestConnect, and expanding tribal energy access. The Energy Secretary called the review process ineffective at improving reliability or cutting costs. The DOE points to other transmission investments instead, including $1.6 billion and $3.3 billion in loans to utility AEP and its Texas subsidiary, along with $26 billion for Georgia Power and Alabama Power, both subsidiaries of the utility Southern Company. Jeremiah, your thoughts?
I have so many, and Mike, in an exclusive here, I have a piece written up that's going to be dropping on our site next week that really outlines the stakes that are associated with developments like this, and it uses what Paul's laid out as a starting place to really explore. I think a lot of these stories tell one side of the story around the costs associated with it and potential land displacement, but there's another side of that story, and that's the value that is going to be unlocked in the short term and long term, and that's something that we as a utility industry, as an energy industry, need to push in a bigger way. But that's for the future. For right now, the DOE's own draft transmission needs study, that's the study that they released just last month, says the opposite of what this decision does. It flags a, let's quote, dire need for more interregional transmission, which makes killing these 3 corridors literally contradictory. It's not new territory either. Congress first created the NIEX back in 2005 after a wave of blackouts, and the first ones designated in 2007 got struck down by a federal court. And in 2011 for skipping required environmental review. So these NIEX now have failed twice under 2 different administrations for 2 different reasons. It was legal process the first time, and this time, let's be charitable and say political friction is the cause this time. The loans that the DOE is touting instead they're real money, but they're upgrades to existing lines, not the new interregional connections that these corridors were designed to build and that the DOE's own study said there's a dire need for. And Mike, I'm going to have a lot more to say about this next week. There might be t-shirts. Stay tuned. So what's our last story?
Well, I'm going to put bets on, or I'm going to not take bets on how quickly those report writers are fired. Just gonna point that out. All right, our 5th story is by returning show guest Molly Taft of Wired, how data centers broke American politics. Molly Taft, welcome back. I really thought this was an awesome story, and it's long and it's in depth, and I think it's a really important read. Give us the big takeaway to get people thinking about this story and enticing them to read it, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, gosh, there's so many things going on. I think one big takeaway is that, when we're talking about opposition to data centers, when I pitched this story back in January, I was noticing a lot of folks in the AI space and in the energy space kind of dismiss data center opposition as just NIMBYism, right? It's like, oh, people just don't like new things in their backyards. People are really concerned about electricity. They're erroneously concerned about water. And the 2 things that made me kind of sit up and take notice is, first of all, for those of us that have watched the opposition to renewable energy, we know that a lot of the so-called NIMBYism comes from a very bipartisan and populist space. I actually reported a couple years ago on the Summit CO2 pipeline resistance, where I went to a meeting that was chaired by both the Sierra Club and Steve King, the congressman who was ejected from Congress for being really racist. It was really fascinating to watch those 2 sides of the coin coalesce and oppose an industrial energy project. And then the other thing I was noticing is that some of the first policies politicians I was keeping track of like more than a year ago at this point, when I first started thinking about how data centers could be a big deal, were right-wing populists like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, who were the first and only people to put together the idea that Trump's, the Republicans' kind of 10-year moratorium on state level AI policy could be used to force through data centers. That was something they were publicly talking about. And they were the only people I saw publicly talking about that. And so I thought, I think this is both bigger than just garden variety NIMBYism and also going to really quickly encompass both parties in a way that is incredibly important. So, I spent most of the piece following this guy named Joe Allen, who rose to prominence on Steve Bannon's podcast. He's a really interesting character, but he has been kind of the anti-tech voice behind Steve Bannon for a couple of years at this point. And a lot of people don't understand that like opposition to AI runs through both political parties. And a lot of what they're talking about when we talk about opposing data centers, opposing AI, kind of don't fall in camps that we currently understand in this kind of bipartisan landscape. Trump is working with a lot of these AI companies. He's pushing through data centers. That doesn't mean a lot of the base that voted for him are happy about it, or even that they are going to follow along. So I really wanted to kind of explore what might be coming and what's already happening with this opposition.
That was one of the things that jumped out to me most, is that these folks that normally wouldn't be aligned politically are around this issue. So, I mean, do you think it is indicative of how those same, what would otherwise be opposing camps might unite on some other issues, even if unite might be too strong of a word, but that it's going to realign the political coalitions in ways that you wouldn't guess?
Yeah, this is something honestly, I grapple with in the piece, and I don't still have an answer. I think that the coalitions on one hand, they are going to be differing so heavily on certain issues. I can see if there's another situation with ICE come up, that's going to maybe fracture some of these coalitions. Like there are some really disparate opinions of people who are uniting on this issue. On the other hand, I think that a lot of people are not seeing past data centers where opposition to tech and AI, which is just increasingly consuming everything we talk about in politics right now, are really going to have these coalitions stick together. I'm thinking about flock cameras, especially right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They're getting like shot out, and citizens literally taking those out.
People hate these things, and one thing I consistently heard from the right is that data centers are surveillance machines, and that is one of the things that they are really opposed to and they do not like. And that, I think, is going to be really huge, is this idea of these deep conversations about the kind of world we're building, and who wins, and who is left feeling increasingly like we're living in Skynet. I don't know the answer to your question, because I don't think we've grappled with anything like this before.
But even
Molly,
what you just...
go ahead,
I was going to say, Mike. Yeah, no, just quickly. I mean, what you just mentioned about how the concerns about AI and concerns about data centers, previously those had been separate issues, but now they're coming together in a way that we're seeing across the board. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'm actually, my firm is on the ground right now in a southern county that voted for Trump 67%, doing community engagement for data centers. Okay. And we were the first ever to poll rural Americans of what they thought of renewable energy built in their midst. Your average conservative Trumpy rural community starts at around 25 to 27% opposed to renewables. Your average community anywhere in America starts at 71% opposition. So it's almost 3x. And it did not get there by accident. So hear me now. If you listen to this show, if you do data center development, and if you think this is a solvable problem by what you've already done, you are going to get your butt kicked. You're going to get rejected. This I wrote on LinkedIn yesterday, this fight is just getting started. You're not, 71% is not the ceiling, it's the new floor. And if you're going to get a community's permission to build in your midst, you're going to have to stop doing boneheaded things like sneaking this past with a bunch of public meeting notices attended by 3 half-asleep senior citizens who are let out of the old folks' home. Like, that doesn't work anymore. You can't buy a bunch of people off. You have to actually explain this, and you're going to have to make these things quieter, much more water conservative, and you're going to need to power them with clean energy that doesn't pollute the hell out of the neighbors. Like, I can tell you, we are in Trumpy communities, and they are deeply, deeply opposed. So, Molly, when I saw this, I was like, wow. And I'll point out, there's a Wall Street Journal piece that came out, I think, 2 days ago that very much echoes what you're talking about. And it talks about the remedial ed classes that the data center, the hyperscalers are giving themselves about how to relate to communities. But oh my gosh, it's not a day too soon.
It's really crazy for me, to be honest. I consistently, and I think everyone who's been reporting on this for a while, like, I've been completely shocked at how data center developers didn't seem to like see any of this coming. Like,
Whoa.
and like, there's a couple of us, like, frankly, like a couple folks who are in the climate space and the renewable space who, like, a year or so ago, we're like, oh my God, this is going to be really, really big. And the way they're going about it, especially, I think, the NDA certainly didn't help. Doing it in the dark certainly didn't help. Like, not disclosing your water or electric use certainly didn't help. But at the same time, I like the insurmountable obstacle of like what is actually being constructed to serve whomst and what is also something that is just, I don't know how we go around it. So good luck to anyone who's trying, I guess.
Yeah, it's good. Jeremiah, I'm sorry I filibuster in this. We could talk about this all day. I certainly could, but I think we're about out of time. We need to go to our Cleantecher of the week.
We are, but such a great piece that really showcases the present, where things are with this issue, but then also that crystal ball potential political future. So great work, Molly. So this week's Cleantecher of the Week is Drew Baglino. He's the founder and CEO of Heron Power. And we were talking about transformers before, and that's why this is such a timely Cleantecher. Baglino is setting out to fix the transformer bottleneck that we talked about. His company builds solid state transformers that don't rely on the steel causing all of those shortages. And Heron just closed a $140 million round to build a U.S. factory capable of producing 40 gigawatts of the gear a year. So congratulations, Drew. And that is the sort of company, the sort of innovation that is going to support and enable these bottlenecks that we've been talking about.
We want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, Alex Peterson, and Claire Quirin for gathering these stories. And we want to wish happy birthday to birthday girl Molly Taft and spend some time on her birthday with us.
Thank you very much.
So thanks so much for joining us for this episode of This Week in Cleantech. Please subscribe, give us feedback, share your story suggestions. You can also read all the articles that we discussed this week by clicking on the links in the episode description.
Take care. We'll see you next week.